Well, welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for President of the United States. It is great to be with you again today. As you all know, I am still in the race. Pence has dropped out. Scott has dropped out. Suarez has dropped out. Let me see, who else has dropped out? I think somebody else has dropped out, haven't they? But at any rate, I'm still in. I am still in. I don't know how long I'll be in. Whether I'll be in to the very end, we shall see. And it depends on what the Lord speaks to me. Right now, I'm in a holding pattern. I will be attending an event coming up here shortly as a presidential candidate. I haven't done much of that lately. My primary campaigning has been to you. So you're the privileged ones who get to see me campaign. Folks, it's been tough. It's been tough. But I'm not a quitter. It's been tough because the mainstream media boycott, the secular and conservative and liberal, has been difficult, to say the least. It's been difficult. And when I see these other candidates being acknowledged, even though they are absolutely, nobody knows who they are, and they have absolutely no chance, they have no constituency, no base whatsoever, but yet they say, this person announced, that person announced, but not me. Didn't cover me at all. And I really believe that it's about anti-Christian bigotry. I think that's what it's about. You know, no problem with a little bit of Christianity, but we don't want too much of it. You know, too much of it spoils things. Too much of it it sets a standard just a bit too high, and we really don't want to go there. And we're losing, as a result, we're losing the entire culture, because our culture is a Judeo-Christian culture. We are a Christian nation culturally, just as India is a Hindu nation culturally. We believe in freedom of religion here, and we defend the rights of people who are not Christians to worship as they see fit, but that doesn't change the fact that our cultural foundation is Christian. And for people who can't get their minds around that, I don't know what to say for them. Separation of church and state, it has nothing to do with that. Look, no country exists in a vacuum. Every country has a cultural context into which it emerges, right? Because the British, the European nations are so ancient, they've been around for so long, in one permutation or another, they ultimately were influenced by Christianity, of course, but there was a lot of paganism long before Christianity entered the picture. That's not so for America. For America, we were birthed in Christianity. That's all we've ever known. We can't look back and say, well, you know, we used to be pagan. Not so. We've always been a Christian nation. Our culture has always been Christian. And the debate among the states was which particular Christian denomination would predominate. Not, well, let's see. Are we going to be Hindus? Are we going to be Buddhists? Are we going to be, you name it. And Muslims, and that wasn't even a discussion, because we clearly were Christian. In fact, you know, in the early stages of the settlement of the country, this is not after we became an independent nation, obviously, but in the early stages of the settlement of the country, there had been a long-standing tradition that once a person became a Christian, they could no longer be enslaved. And remember, slavery was happening all over the world. It's not just the African slave trade. There was worldwide slavery. But for those who had been influenced by Christianity, the thought was you cannot enslave a Christian brother, just like Jews were told not to enslave a Jewish brother. You cannot enslave a Christian brother. And so once a slave, African or otherwise, became a Christian, the notion was that person had to be set free. Now, of course, that was subject to abuse on both sides. And so finally that practice ended. But why was that practice ever even implemented in the first place? Because of the Christian culture of our nation and those who settled the continent in the earliest stages. So my point in saying all of that is that without Christianity, right now we don't have a single person in this race, not one, who comes with a biblical worldview. Not one. And I'm not denying DeSantis is a Catholic Christian, I believe, and Trump is Presbyterian. I don't think anybody would argue that they come to the race with a biblical worldview, right? I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that. Not that they're not influenced by their Christianity. I wouldn't say they're not influenced by it at all. They are, I think. But they're not espousing a biblical worldview. And Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, I mean, Nikki Haley is a Sikh. Now, I know she converted to Christianity, I think, back in 1997. She became a Methodist because she married a man who was a Methodist, and I think she became a Methodist because he was a Methodist. But it's on the record that she still goes to Sikh services. And no true Christian would go to a Sikh service, right? I mean, come on. You couldn't bit more. Look, folks. Well, you know what? I won't even get into it. But let me put it this way. I made the mistake of attending a Jehovah's Witness service for a funeral in behalf of a member of my church whose mother was in Jehovah's Witnesses. I went in there and vowed I'd never go into one of those demonic institutions again, ever, because it was demonic, it was evil, it was palpable. I mean, the things that were said in the funeral, I got up and walked out and said, well, I'll wait until it's over and just fellowship with my member and try to be an encouragement to her, but I vowed I would never go into a kingdom hall, as they put it, again. I wouldn't set foot in one, and I haven't. I have not. And you couldn't get me to go to a Muslim service or go to a Hindu service or a Buddhist service. I wouldn't despoil myself that way. I wouldn't. To me, that's a defilement of who I am. That is rank idolatry, and I'm not going to give it my imprimatur. I'm not going to give it my sanction, my approval in any way. It's evil. It's wicked. These are cults. And I know nobody's willing to say this. Most people aren't willing to say this, but that Islam and Buddhism they're just ancient cults. But they're still just idolatrous cults. That's all they are. And we love the people who are caught up in those cults, but they're still caught up in cults. So we got a Hindu, a Sikh, and I said, I mean, she claims to be a Christian, but again, see, no Christian would go to a Sikh service, and she actually goes to those Sikh services. What that tells me, her conversion was for her husband, kind of to unify the family, not because she actually had an experience with the Lord Jesus Christ. Bobby Jindal actually got saved. He the former governor of Louisiana. He actually got saved. He's got a testimony of what happened with him, how God changed his life, and he rejected Hinduism. In fact, when Nikki Haley was asked, do you think that your parents ought to become Christians? You know what her answer was? And this is close to a quote. Oh, well, I think they ought to do what feels right to them. So that tells me you're not a Christian. Because any Christian would say, of course, because I want them to be saved, because there's no salvation in being a Sikh. There's only one way of salvation. That's through the Lord Jesus Christ. And of course, I want not only my parents, but everybody I know, everybody for that matter, to come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, because it's the only hope for salvation. It's the only hope for eternal redemption. Without that, you are condemned for all of eternity and you are going to hell. She could have given that answer, but of course, most politicians wouldn't dare, because people wouldn't like that. They would consider that disrespectful. What does God consider it? That's the question. Well, here again. So we got a Sikh and a Hindu, and Chris Christie is not, as far as I'm concerned, he's a non-factor. He is a non-factor. So for all practical purposes, and Tim Scott has dropped out. I won't say anything further about that. And he had plenty of money and was getting plenty of press, but he wasn't getting any traction. Okay, I've gotten no press and no money, but I've got a base that Tim Scott could not attract. The Christian base, he could not get them, even though he was going through all the motions of I'm a Christian. I heard him a couple times and just thought, I'm not doubting the man's Christianity at all, but I was not moved. Let me tell you. It came across to me as almost an attempt to exploit his Christianity, an attempt to impress people with it, as opposed to just, I'm a Christian and that's who I am, and therefore everything I say and do is going to reflect that. It was almost like he wanted to kind of put on a Christian show to make sure everybody understood that he was a Christian, and it left me unimpressed. And apparently left the voters unimpressed too, because he gained absolutely no traction, and apparently moved his entire staff to Iowa and got nowhere. So, at any rate, that's really not primarily what I wanted to talk to you about today, but since I haven't spoken to you since Friday, I thought I'd just bring you up to date on where we are. I have not quit, okay? I have not quit. When and if that moment comes, believe me, you will be the first to know publicly, because you all have been watching me and supporting me, and others have not. And so I'm not going to go on some other venue and make an announcement. I'm going to come here first to make it, and then others will find out about it if and when that should happen. But I'm believing God for a breakthrough. So you all pray with me and for me in that regard. I'm believing God for a breakthrough. I believe God put me in this race, and I'm not leaving it until I feel that the Lord has said, okay, you've done what I asked you to do. I'm satisfied, and here's what I want you to do now. Until I get that kind of instruction, I'm just going to sit still, be still, and know that He is God. Okay. Wow. Yesterday, I was at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. for an exclusive showing of footage of the Hamas attack on Israel, the October 7th attack. And folks, let me tell you something. It was terrible. It was terrible. And I'm not squeamish. My favorite kind of movie is an action movie. And nowadays they make things pretty gory from time to time. But this was real. This was not a movie. This was not made up. You know, when you're watching a movie, you know it's made up stuff. And even then, sometimes it can get a little ugly. But this was not made up. This was real. Real people being shot. Real people being killed. Real people having their bodies abused. I mean, this was real. And we were shown a film that lasted about an hour and about an hour actually, maybe about an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes. Yeah, about an hour, maybe, well, yeah, close to an hour and a half actually, close to an hour and a half. 138 different clips of incidents of what Hamas did. And this is the best way I can describe it for you, because it never hit me until I saw this. And believe me, it was hard to watch, folks. I mean, there were times when I almost came to tears just watching the stuff that they were doing. It was just... But here's how it struck me. Imagine, wherever you live right now, okay, your city, your town, imagine if suddenly, all at once, 300 mass murderers showed up, and they literally began to kill everybody they saw. I mean, imagine that. 300 mass murderers show up, loaded for bear, unlimited amounts of ammo, hand grenades, rockets, okay? Every imaginable kind of weapon for ground combat show up, and they just start killing people indiscriminately. Everybody, if you happen to be driving down there, say they're coming up the road, entering into your city and you happen to be coming down that street, they immediately open fire on your car with automatic weapons. And then when somebody's finally hit, injured, the car can't go forward, they then come up to the car and make sure everybody in the car is dead. They drag the bodies out, let the bodies lay on the ground and shoot the bodies on the ground. And they cheer and celebrate. They come to a house, they go into that house, they kill everybody in the house. Some of the women, you see them take away to be raped, but they kill everybody ultimately. They kill children. You see the bodies of children that were murdered. No mercy. There's one case in which a guy calls his parents, excited and celebrating, telling his mother and his father he just killed 10 Jews. And his mother and his father celebrate with him, say, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. It's a great thing. The mother and father, I mean, literally celebrating, tears of joy, expressions of joy that he's killing Jews. You see one case in which they take what looks like a backhoe to try to chop a guy's head off. And you watch the repeated blows. He's dead, but they're trying to get his head chopped off for effect. And then you hear them talking to the people in Gaza, and they're telling them, bring some of these bodies back, that we may parade them in the streets, that we may celebrate with them. So they literally just load up dead bodies to take back when the time comes, so that the people of Gaza can celebrate that we've got the bodies of these dead Jews. Hey, folks, it was horrific. You know, one of the things I observed, and my team and I were talking about this on the way home. You know, Israel had fairly strict gun control laws. And one of the interesting things we observed was we didn't see any of the civilians that they attacked capable of defending themselves. Apparently, they had no firearms. Because they were running, they were hiding, they were trying to figure out a place to go, but they had no ability, it seemed, to fire back. We didn't see a single person who ran to a cabinet. Because, you know, sometimes they had cameras in the house, and so you could see the people running, trying to hide. And, of course, the terrorists were wearing body cams, and they had phones. And you see people running and trying to hide. You don't see a single person going to a cabinet and picking up an AR, picking up, an AK or something. Or whatever, a pistol or something, saying, well, maybe I'm going to die, but I'm going to take some of them with me. And I'm going to defend my family to the last. They seemed like they were all sitting ducks. And my understanding is Israel is now in the process of distributing firearms to the populace again. Distributing them. See, this is the danger of an unarmed population, because you are then at the mercy of bloodthirsty killers, and that's what seemed to be the case yesterday. These Jews were at the mercy of these bloodthirsty killers. That's why I am such an avid supporter of the Second Amendment, because I don't ever want Americans to be at the mercy of a bunch of criminals and thugs and terrorists, and for that matter, tyrants either. We want to always be in a position to defend ourselves, our families, our property against all comers. That's just that plain and simple. And I say that as a Christian who loves the Lord and loves people and doesn't want to hurt anybody. But I've got a God-given right to defend myself and defend my family, and will, with everything I've got. And it just felt like these folks were just sitting ducks. Now, my understanding is that they're reevaluating this policy of disarming the populace. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. You know, interestingly, and yet, right across the border of Gaza, literally one one step away into a territory controlled by Hamas, you've got people armed to the teeth. See, criminals, the terrorists, the mass murderers are always going to get their hands on the weapons. It's the law-abiding citizens who will find themselves at a complete disadvantage, or completely helpless for that matter, because their government has decided that it's illegal for them to have firearms. The criminals don't care. But at any rate, it was a horrific thing to watch. Today, there is a big rally starting, I believe, at 11 o'clock. I think it's going from 11 to 1 or something like that on the mall. I was invited to come. I could not be there. But I'll tell you what, I am fully in support of them. And if first of all, let's be praying for them. But if you're anywhere in the area and you can get there, by all means get there. The situation is going to be highly secure because you know there are going to be protesters. But thank God, as we lined up to go into the embassy yesterday, there was not a group of protesters there. I think it's because it was kept very quiet, very low-key, by invitation only. There was no public announcement that this event was happening, but somebody still managed to get there. And there was two or three people standing outside with a sign denouncing America, denouncing Israel. Once again, folks, let me make this clear, just in case anybody is mistaken about it. The same people who hate Jews hate Christians. The same people who hate Israel hate America. And if we don't stand with Israel, they're coming after us next. We should stand with Israel because it's morally right, number one. It's spiritually right. But we should stand with Israel also because, as a practical matter, we are next on the list. Israel is Satan in their view, and we are the great Satan. They don't realize Satan is their father, not ours. And they're following him to the T. They're his slaves. But of course, since he is a liar and a deceiver, naturally he would turn and call Israel and America satanic. It's bizarre. Let's be praying for them. I am going to be, we're working on it now. My staff is working on it now. We're going to have a banner that we will make available to you to fly in your church. You can have it done. Now, our banner is going to have our logos on it, the stand logo and the church logo, but you can have one without the logos on it. You can put your own church logo on it, and we'll make that available to you if you want it. Of course, it would be at cost, but we'll make that available to you, to your church, if you want to have a banner. The banner simply says, "Stand with Israel." Stand with Israel. Because that's where we stand. No question about it. All right. Let me say a couple of other things, get to a couple of other issues. You all know that Xi Jinping is coming to San Francisco. This brutal, vicious, idolatrous, communist dictator is coming to San Francisco so that Joe Biden can kiss his feet once again, kiss his ring, kowtow to him. And apparently they're cleaning up San Francisco so that when Xi Jinping gets there, he won't be able to see all the homeless people lined up along the streets of downtown San Francisco. But when he goes back, you can rest assured that their propaganda arm will talk about how the Americans got rid of all their homeless because the American system is so bankrupt and so terrible. Capitalism is so terrible. America is so terrible. They had to hide their homeless when Xi Jinping came. I mean, folks, again, I get no joy out of saying this. I really don't. I get no joy out of saying this. Joe Biden is a traitor. Now, he may not have committed treason in the legal sense, but the fact that he sold his soul to the communists, to Chinese, to other nations around the world in order to enrich himself and his family at the expense of the United States of America, because he's not interested in us or in what's good for our country, which is why he never talks China down. Oh, China! Oh no, we're not going to we're not going to decouple. We can work with them. Remember his speech about, oh man, they're going to eat our lunch. Come on, man. Remember all that? Well, now we know what that was all about. What that was all about was that he'd been bought, lock, stock, and barrel. The man is a moral sewer. He and his family have only one rule: do what's good for the Bidens. That's their only rule. Lie, steal, cheat, do whatever you want to do. But as long as the end result is that it's good for the Bidens. And by the way, and that is the way communists think, folks. There are no moral rules except what advances our cause. And by the way, these communists who railed against the rich and railed against wealth and railed against, they always live like kings. The leaders of these countries live like kings. After having railed against the czars or railed against the emperors or railed against the capitalists and the large landowners and how horrible they are. And they end up having the same thing. But except they turn the whole nation into a slave state. Because that's what China is, that's what Cuba is. It is a slave state. Maybe if Putin has his way, Russia will be once again too. But under the Soviet Union, Russia was nothing, and all of its satellite nations were nothing but slave states. And these people are always railing against the slavery in America that ended in 1865, want to impose upon a system that is worse than any slave system that ever existed in the world. Because communism is not only a system of slavery, it's a system of genocide. It's a totalitarian system of absolute control over everything and everybody, including your life. So Xi Jinping is coming to America. Look, I don't want to go to war with China. Don't get me wrong. But the way to avoid war with China is to project strength so that China looks upon us and says, don't mess with America. They're too strong, they're too determined, and they simply will not be subjugated. Yeah, by all means, we need to decouple. We need to start establishing our own manufacturing in this country again, and in places where we can do manufacturing because they are our allies rather than an enemy, where we're not depending upon China for our pharmaceuticals and depending upon China. I mean, do you realize China makes our trolley cars and our subway cars? We're buying them from China, folks. I mean, can you believe that we actually have China making some of our weapons? I mean, what in the world is wrong with us? Or what's wrong with our government? Well, we know what's wrong with them. And by the way, I can say this, and I don't care that anybody calls me a racist, because it has nothing to do with the race of the Chinese people. It has to do with the vicious, brutal, dictatorial regime of the Chinese Communist Party, period. We love these people. Now, some of them are imbued with this vicious, evil ideology, and we can't do anything with them. But some of these people know they're living under a slave system, and they want out. You got Christians who know it. You got even some Muslims, the Uyghurs, who know it. And probably other people who just, they know that the system is a totalitarian slave state, and they want out, but they can't get out. Because if you even speak against it, you disappear. You lose your property and maybe lose your life. That's the way it works. But we're going to host him here, and we'll roll out the red carpet, and we'll act like he's just the greatest thing since sliced bread. And Joe Biden will happily bow and kowtow and kiss his feet and kiss his ring and you know, talk about how wonderful Xi Jinping is because Joe Biden is a corrupt criminal president and a traitor to this country. They won't hear any politicians or candidates for president say that, but somebody needs to say it because it's the truth. The impeachment of Mayorkas is off. He needs to be impeached. He's another one. He has betrayed this country. They are flooding this country with illegal immigrants for their own political purposes. They could care less about our laws, our sovereignty, our national security. We've got probably terrorists. We don't even know who they are, where they are in this country right now. I guarantee you there are terrorists in this country right now who are plotting to kill Americans right now because we've let them in. You've got MS-13 gang members and pedophiles and rapists and robbers who are in this country right now and are preying on the American people right now. We see it in the news practically every day. Or who is not going to vote for the resolution. I believe the speaker tabled it because he didn't have the votes for it. And it's sad because I think the American people want somebody like this who sits up there and lies to the American people, bold-faced lie. The border is secure. Yeah. The border is secure, right. And that way, and anybody who believes that, again, I got a great big old bridge in Brooklyn, I'll sell you cheap. I mean, but they have no respect for the American people. They have no regard for the intelligence of the American people, our ability to assess or analyze what they're saying or doing. They just we don't matter to them. It's just that plain and simple. We just don't matter to them. By the way, folks, final story, and then I'm going to close out here. Oh, one other thing I want to mention. You know, there is a U.S. Senate, a state Senate race in Virginia that may be reversed because the Democrat who won lied on the reporting form. You have to live in the district when you run for a state Senate seat in Virginia, lied on the form. People have found out that she actually has a home outside the district, lied on the form, said she was residing in the district, and lied on the form saying that she owned no other real estate property when she and her husband own a house outside the district. She may be gone, and there may be nothing Democrats can do to stop it, because that's a felony subject to $2,500 fine and 10 years in prison. And she lied. But see here again, this points out the truth of what Democrats have become. They don't care about lying. They don't care about cheating. Remember, one Democrat was running who was selling sex online with her husband. You know, we'll perform this act or that act for you if you give us so much money. I mean, just absolutely depraved, despicable, disgusting human beings. And do you think the Democrats came against them? No, they did not. Some quietly slinked away, didn't want to be associated, but nobody said, this is terrible. We can't have someone like this representing our party. No, they just kept quiet. And the demonic Louise Lucas, who is not far from where I reside, thank God she's not my state senator, but the woman is demonic, and she only 9 is 20 to 19. So they've got it by one vote. So they lose one vote, it becomes a tie, and then the lieutenant governor, who is a Republican, Winsome Sears, can break the ties. But still, they've lost the House. So, but that's at least something. Here's the last thing I want to mention to you. Alan Dershowitz had been a fan of Barack Obama. I've been telling you all that Barack Obama was a closet anti-Semite. I said this years ago. I said he's a closet anti-Semite. He does not like Jewish people. He does not like Israel, but he pretends not to. Remember, when he became president, he went 4 years without visiting Israel. You know, when he visited Israel, when he was running for re-election, he felt he had to do it as just a show, and he finally did. It was in the last months of his campaign for re-election. He had not been to Israel, one of our chief ally in the Middle East. He had not been there in 4 years. Now, he had been to Egypt, because he had given that famous speech in Egypt where he said, America's not a Christian nation. Remember that? So he'd been to Egypt, and I guess other countries in the Middle East, but not Israel. Well, Alan Dershowitz got the revelation. Here's what Alan Dershowitz has said, and I'm quoting him. I think he always had a deep hatred of Israel in his heart. He hid it very well. He called me to the Oval Office and he said to me, Alan, you've known me for a long time. You know I have Israel's back. He said, I didn't realize he meant to paint a target on it. Quote, he's never been supportive of Israel, and finally his true feelings have come out now that he's no longer president and doesn't have to be elected. He has contributed enormously to the problem because he is respected among young people, and if he says the occupation is, quote, unbearable, which is what Obama said, and that anything can be done to stop it, he is encouraging young people to engage in their anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and anti-American attitudes. He should be ashamed of himself. He should apologize, but he won't. 2023, Alan Dershowitz has a revelation. And no disrespect to Alan Dershowitz, but folks, I had that revelation 14 years ago when Obama first emerged on the scene, 15 years ago when he first emerged on the scene. I told people that. And here again, I'm not criticizing Alan Dershowitz, but I don't know why we want to blind ourselves to these people when you know they're lying to you. I mean, Obama is a consummate liar. He's like his father, the devil. The deeds of his father he will do. He was a liar from the beginning, and the truth is not in him. That's the devil. And Obama is a liar. When Obama sat in Rick Warren's church and said that he supported marriage union between one man and one woman because he's a Christian, he was lying. I said it then. He was lying. And you know why? The LGBTQ, the SPCG, the sexual perversion child grooming movement, didn't rise up in arms and say, "What? He's anti-gay," because they knew he didn't mean it. They knew he was lying. Wink, wink, nod, nod. That's what he's got to say to get elected. Then once he gets elected, he can do what needs to be done, and he did. I'm struggling. I'm wrestling with it. I'm wrestling with same-sex marriage. Oh, please. He was never. He might have been wrestling with something else, but he wasn't wrestling with same-sex marriage because he always supported it. I mean, a guy who was fantasizing about having sex with other men, and you think he was against same-sex marriage? Please. He's a liar. He was lying then. And he's finally, now it's coming out, like Alan Dershowitz says, coming out now that he doesn't have to run for re-election. But anybody who knew his background, understood where he was coming from, knew that he was lying through his teeth when he said he supported Israel, because he never did. You look at the way he treated Netanyahu. Look at the fact that he didn't go visit Israel. I mean, remember he kept Netanyahu sitting in the basement of the White House while he went up and had dinner with his family and acted like some bum was down there? To mop the basement or something? You know, we better get a revelation. The Democrat Party is wholly on the side of the devil. Let me say that again, folks. The Democrat Party is wholly on the side of the devil. Now you say, well, what about the Republicans? There are Republicans who are wholly on the side of the devil. But as long as there's a platform in the Republican Party that at least upholds biblical principles, I can't say that about the Republican Party. I don't know that I'll always be able to say that about the Republican Party, that it's not wholly given over to the devil. Some Republicans are, unfortunately. I don't know whether I'll always be able to say that, but I think I can say that now. The problem is that the people who run the Republican Party at the highest levels, most of them, I'm going to give the new speaker a pass right now because he came out of nowhere, and I'm believing that he's God's man for the hour in that position. But most of these Republican elites, I mean, I'll give Ted Cruz a pass, and I'll give some of these guys, but most of them, it's about the same thing the Democrats are about: power. And I'm pro-life as long as it suits me, as long as it's helpful. But if it's not helpful, well, now wait a minute. Let's fudge things a little bit here. Let's rethink this. We don't want to be extreme. So I'm not giving the Republican Party a pass by any stretch of the imagination. I told you I'm still thinking about running as an independent, because as far as I am concerned, the way the Republican Party has treated me is unconscionable. The only thing I won't say is unforgivable, because I have to forgive as a Christian anything, but it's unconscionable. And frankly, it's sown into me a level of distrust of Republican Party elitists that I will never, ever, never ignore again. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're just as bad as Democrats. Because it's just about power. And you know what? You sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. See how that quest for power works out for you. If you're going to play on the devil's field by his rules, you're going to lose. You can't out-Satan Satan. And the Republican Party should be the party of the evangelical base that makes it possible for Republicans to win, but they're not. They're not. Ronna McDaniel is not part of the base. She stands apart from the base. And again, why in the world Donald Trump appointed this woman, I will never know. It was a big mistake. A big mistake. But, you know, so was putting Anthony Fauci up. Look how the country suffered as a result of that decision. So, I mean, and I supported Donald Trump in his first presidency 100%, but he wasn't perfect. And appointing Ronna McDaniel was one of the big political mistakes of his career. Because Ronna McDaniel is not, as far as I'm concerned, Ronna McDaniel is a rhino at best. She has no interest in the platform. She only has an interest in Ronna McDaniel and Ronna McDaniel's power. And the fact that the Republicans are losing by the numbers is because of her poor leadership in part, and she ought to go, but she won't because she doesn't want to give up her perks. If the woman had any honor and integrity, she'd say, you know what? Having lost in 2 cycles, 2022, 2023, I think it's time to give someone else a chance. I think I've done the very best I could. I think circumstances may be beyond my control, but my interest is in America and the Republican Party being a force for good in America. And I just feel like I can't provide the leadership that is needed any longer, and I'm going to step aside. Now, that would be honorable. And you know what? I can say, wow, okay, I admire that. But she's not going to do that. She's not like George Washington, who holds the reins of power lightly. She's like Stalin, who can't let go. Squeeze it tight and choke people to death if she has to in order to hold on to it. Now, forgive the comparison to Stalin, obviously. She's not a murderous dictator, but the spirit of hunger and thirst for power at all costs. Even I gotta go. Even King George admired George Washington for his willingness to relinquish power for the good of the nation. I gotta go. I've gone way over. I looked at my watch when it was just about 9 o'clock, and I've already spent almost 15 more minutes with you, so I didn't mean to do that, but hey. Look, don't give up. Don't lose heart, whatever you do. You see all these websites. These are the things I'm up to right now. Help me, support me in whatever way you can. Stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up. Stand with Israel, by the way, because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit, because we are on God's side.